Hello everyone, here we are in 2022 and my third year of YouTubing, and no one's more surprised than I am. Certainly didn't see this coming. Anyway, this week I'm painting some glass. I've chosen a glass jar as I really like the various marks that can be seen in jars. For instance, around the screw tops. Lots of shine and different interesting areas of shine can be seen in a glass jar. More so actually than just a tumbler. Obviously lots more in cut glass, but that's maybe a step too far to demonstrate at the moment. These are the colours I'm going to use, and as you see there are some warm colours here because I received 50 parrot tulips for Christmas and I've been itching to paint them but not really had the time. So I've just popped a couple into this composition, as you see here. They are starting to go over, but I really like them like that, and they are actually showing up lots of different shapes and colours now, so I'm not going to be putting them out just yet. But actually I'm going to try and put a little bit more colour into those flowers, and these are the colours I'm actually going to use for the glass. And it may surprise you to see the green there, but actually my glass jar that I have in front of me that has the tulip in it has got a touch of green, but I've actually emphasised that further. Now, I don't know how well you're going to see this, but if I pop a glass jar of water onto white paper, then it's just really two colours and maybe not quite so interesting. But if I pop some colour underneath, in this case some green, then it's casting up a lot more colour and certainly showing lovely green on the top of the water. So all of this actually adds interest, and it also creates an easier subject because the colours are a little bit more they're stronger and you can see them a lot more, and it helps you to put more colour into your actual subject. So this week just paint a glass jar if you are a beginner and you don't feel that you can do anything too complicated, but make sure you put water in because it adds another dimension and makes it a lot more interesting. So I'll just put that to one side. I hope you can see that tulip. Right, so I've drawn, after my initial drawing of the jar and the flowers, I've got one tulip sitting in the jar and I've got another one lying in front of the jar. Okay, so I've masked off the very bright shine that I can see on the jar because that's always going to be helpful insofar as every time I move my head or if the light changes, then these little light, really bright, shiny areas move and change place. So it's a good idea to mask them off. Do it as carefully as you possibly can because it's important that they actually show up the right shapes, and it will actually help you then to paint over the top. These bright areas of shine obliterate everything, every colour and so on, so they will end up as white paper, which will be helpful. And I can see a lot of colour in my jar, but I'm actually going to also use Payne's Grey for some of the glass, but I can see now a lot of green in there. So I'm going to start off with the jar, and I'll probably be leaving even more white paper I like painting glass jars because they do have quite a lot of interest and they have a nice simplicity about them. Right. So this is quite a watery. I'm just going to turn this music down. But I will actually mention Scott Buckley again because I think his music is the best YouTube music that I've found. So thank you very much to Jeff Buckley, and I will continue to use his music for YouTube. It's very, very difficult to find any that's suitable and nice. I wish more people would do what he's doing. So I'm quite happy to mention him. Right, I'm going to dip into the green as well. I've got two different greens here. I've got sap green and cobalt green, which will add a little bit of a bluey tinge as well. I don't know if you can hear the cat purring. She's very happy to be in here. She's actually asleep, but she's purring in her sleep. She was in such a sound sleep, I didn't like to disturb her, but if she wakes up, I might be in trouble because she'll jump up and want to drink the paint water. So I'm working around these little areas that create the bumps where the screw top goes on the top of the jar. So that's a good jar to get hold of if you've got one that has the screw top. So we have to watch out for distortion. I've got a leaf and a stalk to contend with inside this jar. Using water. I don't know if you can see it, but I did actually pop down a very, very light wash here and there of some Naples yellow behind because I wanted to reflect that colour back up into the glass, because in actual fact I can see lots and lots of colour in this jar because there's lots of stuff going on in the studio behind me, but I didn't want to get that complicated, so I'm sort of winging it a little bit by putting and trying to simplify it for you by putting this Naples yellow colour behind, and I can reflect that back down into the glass. It gets very dark in places. I've got light coming into the studios from 3 windows and a skylight, so lots of light in here, which is actually showing all sorts of various bits of shine on my jar. Leaving light, touch of green at the side here. So I haven't actually entered into the area yet where the water is, but I'm about to now, and there is a lot of green reflecting up onto the top of the water. So because the green paper was directly underneath, so it's reflected back up onto the top of the water, which is lovely for me to have something to go at here. But I'm working around the leaf and the stalk. Darker here. Huge area of shine coming down from the skylight, I guess, there. So that's the water. So I would suggest that if you actually paint a jar, make sure that you put some water in it, because it's going to give you another dimension and give some nice colour where the water actually sits. But what I've done is to put some masking fluid around the area where the stalk and the leaf goes into the water, because it always makes a little sort of pool there, and so working over that masking will help to show that up. Right. And I haven't taken the water line with my paint directly to the edges of the jar, because I want to show the thickness of the jar as well, which is looking light there. So lots to think about, so keep it fairly simple if you're a beginner this week, but be good if the more experienced might like to take on more of a challenge. So make sure if you put masking fluid down that you cover it, because otherwise you're not going to get the marks that you first wanted. And when you laid it down in the first place. Right, so this actually is the line of the paper underneath, but because there's a shape to my jar, it's a distorted shape, and that straight line becomes distorted here. So there actually is a lot of distortion to deal with. For instance, the stalk and the leaf doesn't carry on in exactly the same way as it is in real life, but gets distorted behind the glass. So you have to try to show that, because it all then helps to show the transparency in the jar. But there's a lovely bit of light here, which I'm going to try and keep as white paper. Difficult to know which are shadows that are showing up from behind, and in fact which are reflections of things going on behind. So if you set up something glass, try to keep it simple and maybe put something behind so you're not getting so many. I'm having to sort of work around the fact that there's a desk and a chair and various paintings and curtains behind me, behind the subject. But if you were to set up something whereby you've got just plain colour behind, it's going to be helpful to you. So the tulip actually is sitting a little bit in front of the jar here, so try not to go over its petal there. Seem to be showing some transparency, so it's all right so far, but I'm only really looking at the areas that I'm painting. I'm not looking very carefully yet at anything else. Right. Dark, dark, dark. Here. So be brave, put these colours in, and the depth of colour, because the depth of colour always shows up the lights. I'm working around this leaf here, which is sitting right at the edge of the jar. So not going to paint that just yet. Right, so that's good. Now to bring that depth back again somewhere else, might be a good idea to just pop it up here. As I said, every time I move my head, the light's changing. So I may just leave it at that for now. You have to show the back side of the jar at the bottom as well, because that all helps with transparency. Right, so I can stop there, I think, for the moment, and I'll just turn off and get my colours ready to paint the flower and the leaf. Right, this isn't completely dry, but I don't need to touch it at the moment, so I'm just going to leave it for now. I've just popped a little bit of the yellow in that I decided that originally I was going to put in but forgot. So just a little bit of the Naples yellow just to bring this background colour through very slightly. Right. Okay, so I've made my colours nice and juicy for the tulips, and I'm going to paint them quite loosely because it's really all about the jar, and I don't have time to paint them too carefully. So I pop down some of the yellow that I'm using, the New Gamboge, or you can use cad-free yellow, and I'm actually just popping the red, which is quinacridone red, on the top, keeping an eye on the subject, but in fact I am putting a little bit more colour in because I want to, and it's going to show up better on the camera. For some reason it has some lovely bluey grey colour in it. So I'm using cobalt blue, which if it mingles with the orange, it's going to make a grey anyway, which is nice. Quinacridone red is a transparent colour, so it should actually create a nice loose effect. But the reds change, and in fact there's a little bit of alizarin going on in there. I treated myself to a new brush today because I really needed a good point. It's a mixture, sable blend, size 8, but it has a really good point, which I needed for getting in and out of the nooks and crannies in the jar. So try to find a nice pointy brush for your glass. You can see why these are called parrot tulips. A lot of the petal shapes are very feathery looking, but actually when they start to go over, They are amazing colours, really, really amazing colours, and amazing shapes as well. It gets really dark in there. It's just the inside of the... So I'm allowing these colours to blend and to create shapes. You don't have to just put flowers in your jar. You could put your paintbrushes in, or I don't know, anything else that you put in jars. Spaghetti, nice long pasta would look nice. Not particularly colourful, but right, try not to touch this too much. It folds back here and gets deep in colour. It's very dramatic music. I do like it though. Changed my life. I don't have to sit here worrying about whether or not I'm breaching copyright, which I have done several times without realising it, without meaning to, without wanting to. It's all a bit of a struggle. There, I think that's all right. That's just shown up some of the sort of shapes that this particular flower has. I've got another one down here. Shall I do that now? Yeah, because I really shouldn't touch this for a bit. So let's work on this one. Popping down my yellow first. This little petal is sitting in front, which is helpful in that it breaks up the monotony of the shape of the jar. So anything that you can do to create interest and avoid monotony in your pictures, think about that. Try to remember what I put in the notes that I sent you last week. Got that lovely bluey grey colour on the outside of this petal here, which is a nice contrast to that one, which hasn't got so much. We'll be doing some loose painting again soon. I think maybe next month we can start on something like that. I know a lot of you like painting loosely. I also know a lot of you are not so keen. But it's another technique, and one of my favourites anyway. Because I have had to suspend my classes again for a bit with things the way they are, my YouTube group has increased quite considerably. So welcome back everyone, and I hope we'll be back in the studio again soon. Very disappointing, but here we are. I look forward to having the contact with you in this way. at least we're painting. A lot of colour in this one. I like it. Good feathery edges. Maybe you can come up with something really unusual to put in your glass that I haven't thought of that and haven't seen for a while. So, looking forward to it. Right, nearly there. And really there won't be so much more to do now. Glass looks difficult, but we can actually simplify it for ourselves by following a few little rules. So I've been at it for about half an hour. There. Now I've just got the leaves to think about. This is a lovely soft red, but it goes a bit weak sometimes, so maybe if you used it for anything, allow it to dry like that and then go back and just give another little layer. But I think I've kind of indicated what those little tulips look like. I'll just pop that out of the way now, because I want to do the stalks and leaves. So I've got the normal green, the lighter green that I use. Now I don't want it to be too similar to the green that's in the jar, which in fact it isn't. So lots of yellow in these leaves because they're going over, which will keep it all together a bit with that yellowy background. So this isn't in the water, so it's just plain and simple leaf. But I'm working in the direction that I see the markings in it. It's a bit darker that side. And it has a little touch of warmth in the tip, which is nice. Adds a bit of interest and bringing it together with the tulip. Bit of shadow under here. Shadow here. I'll leave it. Right. Stalks are really quite light. But showing shadow under here. And then it starts to become distorted behind the glass and a little bit darker. So I'm going to put a little bit of the red with my mix. Complementary colours, green and red, so if you want to darken or deepen your... It comes and goes, you can't actually see all of it. If you want to darken and deepen your greens, then put a bit of red with it. And then it disappears completely behind there, but it's just a sort of dark shape. So watch out all the time for these little changes, because that's what's going to help to make your picture look realistic. There's just a dark shape there. And then it gets, pick it up again behind the glass, but it's slightly pushed over to one side. It isn't, it's distorted in the glass a bit, but it gets even more distorted when it goes actually into the water. And there's a bit more colour in it, and it's all fuzzy and not distinct at all. So dropping water on would help. And then it just disappears down the side of the jar here. And sits at the side of the jar. But then it gets really dark just here. So I'm just popping that colour over the top. So there's the distortion taken care of there. I've got some leaf and stalk to contend with here, where it's just lying there. And a bit of leaf showing, but not very much, because it's behind the flower. But looking a little bit different on the inside of it. There, so there's a bit of leaf. Right, so what do I need to do now? Make sure that everything is dealt with. Make sure that I've gone over everywhere that I've actually got masking fluid, because otherwise I won't get the marks I want. And then pop some grounding down. So I need to use the colour that I see reflecting in the glass here. And if you do try to create something like a tabletop, then that's got to be level. Silly. So don't rush this like I am. It's important that you get that level and you get that looking right. Maybe it helps to just pop the water down first really and just let it float around in the water. It is really, because then the paint doesn't go beyond the water line. Keep that nice and free. But it doesn't want to be quite dark under here. which shows up at the bottom of the jar, and there's going to be a lot of shadow under there. This brush is good. It's helped a lot. Right, okay. So that's just grounded the subject. You can put any shape you like under there, but I do tend not to take it right to the edge of the page. It's not necessary, and it takes the eye away from the subject anyway. So a nice shape under here, and maybe darker where it's this flower is lying down. It's got that frilly edge which I tried to keep. Laying the brush on its side a little bit to get a bit of dry brushwork there. Keep this side wet. And why not reflect just a little bit of red back down here. Don't worry if you get a cabbage. Right, I think that's all I need to do apart from allow it to dry, and I'll take the masking off, and so you can see what goes on behind the masking. But while I'm waiting for that to dry, I will just go through something else with you and maybe show you this, because it's got all the things in that I've actually just been talking about. The transparency, whereby you see what's going on behind, the green paper, which is actually reflecting up into the water. You've got the distortion behind the brush that I popped in there. But as I said, if you don't want all of these different areas of colour coming into your jar, put something plain behind it, okay? But I will actually photograph and attach this for you, because it is actually hopefully helpful insofar as I've indicated all the things that you need to think about, like the colour reflected on the top of the water, the light on the rim to be masked off, as I have with all the other. This is a very quick sketch, but you see what I'm talking about. Masking off all the light areas, show the back side of the water. There's a little light pool where whatever goes in creates that light shape around it, so that always helps to show that whatever you've put in the water is actually in the middle of the water and not sitting on the edge and stuck to the edge of the side of the vessel. So indicate that little light pool where the stalks enter the water. Show the thickness of glass by not taking your waterline right to the edge. Distortion where the stalk goes in the water, and show the back edge of the vessel, and depth and light underneath, whatever you can actually see. I can see light and depth actually in my picture there. So keep it simple if you're a beginner, but obviously if you do feel like the challenge and you want to go for cut glass, well then do so. Some of this is masked off and some actually not, but look really carefully all the time at your subject. Try to keep your head still, try to not move around too much, because all of these little areas of cut glass which are showing the bright light are going to move when you move or if the light changes. So that would be for the more experienced, I think. Same again. but this time I've put a flower in and reflected some of that colour of the flower and the colour underneath back up into the subject. Again, some of this is masked and some not, but you do need to keep a really good look out at what you're painting and see where you need to leave the white paper, but actually when you look at it there isn't that much white paper left, but there are different tones. All right, so I'll have to stop while I just wait for this to dry, because we mustn't put a hot hairdryer on masking fluid. It doesn't like it and it won't come off. So I'll probably put the cold hairdryer on it and then I'll come back and show you what it's like with the masking on. There we are. I've taken the masking fluid off now. Not done really anything else apart from I just touched up a little bit of depth behind the little screw top area, so that showed up a little bit more. You often do have to just touch it up and smarten it up a little bit after taking masking fluid off, because it's tricky stuff. A little bit of window there. So that's it. I'd like you to paint some glass this week. Choose your own vessel and paint it empty or place something inside. Putting water in always gives another dimension, as I've said. The more experienced may wish to paint something more complicated, but personally I love the simplicity of glass paintings. But beginners really should keep it simple. It's not as easy as it might seem. It's a difficult subject. And I look forward to seeing you next week, when I will continue with still life and include material in my composition and maybe some lace or something. So stay safe. My little audience of one behaved herself. I'll try and give you a little shot of her, but I can't guarantee it'll work. But if not, I'll be with you next week. Have a good week. Take care. Bye.